32 years. It's a span of time that can feel both impossibly long and startlingly brief, enough to witness seismic shifts in technology, culture, and even our understanding of the natural world. For some, it's a period of profound personal growth, of building families, careers, and legacies. For others, it's a chasm, a void where life was meant to be, marked by an agonizing absence. For Mark and Sarah, a young American couple whose names have become whispered legends in the dusty annals of the Grand Canyon, 32 years is the duration of their inexplicable disappearance, a cruel testament to the wild, untamed power of one of America's most iconic landscapes. Their story, once a vibrant narrative of love and adventure, dissolved into a chilling mystery, leaving behind a void that the desert winds have carried for over 3 decades, a constant, mournful echo. They weren't seasoned explorers, nor were they reckless thrill-seekers. They were simply a young couple, brimming with the optimism and wanderlust that draws so many to the breathtaking vistas of the Grand Canyon. They sought not to conquer the canyon, but to immerse themselves in its grandeur, to etch their own small chapter into its immense geological story. Their decision to embark on this journey was, by all accounts, a celebration of life, a prelude to a future they were so eager to build together. But somewhere within that vast, unforgiving expanse, their vibrant existence was abruptly extinguished, their laughter silenced, their shared dreams left to crumble like the ancient sandstone. The official story, or rather the lack thereof, is a stark and unsettling one. They entered the canyon, and they never emerged. No trace, no sign, just an agonizing silence that has stretched into an unbearable eternity for their loved ones. It's the kind of mystery that festers, that gnaws at the edges of collective consciousness, a stark reminder of our own vulnerability against the indifferent might of nature. We tend to think of national parks as curated experiences, controlled environments where adventure comes with safety nets. But the Grand Canyon, in its raw primal magnificence, often reminds us that it is a force unto itself, a place where human endeavors can be swallowed whole, leaving no trace. The prevailing narrative for years has been one of tragic accident, a misstep, a moment of disorientation that led to an irreversible fate. Yet the absence of any definitive evidence has always kept the door ajar for other possibilities, for the lingering questions that refuse to be silenced by the passage of time. It's a narrative that has been confined to the archives, a cold case gathering dust, a somber footnote in the park's history. Until now, the Earth, in its slow, inexorable way, has chosen to speak. A routine geological survey, an endeavor focused on understanding the canyon's deep past, has stumbled upon a relic from Mark and Sarah's forgotten journey. Their car, their once familiar vehicle, now a spectral artifact, buried deep beneath layers of sand and sediment, a silent, profound testament to their final, unrecorded moments. This discovery isn't just the unearthing of a vehicle. It's the unearthing of an unresolved story, a reopening of a wound that time had barely begun to scab over. It is a tangible link to the past, a physical manifestation of the mystery that has haunted the canyon for decades, compelling park rangers and investigators alike to revisit the cold case with a renewed sense of urgency and purpose. This discovery has breathed new life into a narrative that had long been resigned to the realm of conjecture and speculation. It's a chance, perhaps the only chance, to finally understand what happened to Mark and Sarah, to piece together the fractured remnants of their final days, and to offer some semblance of closure to a story frozen in time. This is not just about finding answers. It's about understanding the enduring power of the landscape, the fragility of human presence within it, and the profound human need to resolve the unresolved, to bring peace to the lingering echoes of the past. The recovery of Mark and Sarah's vehicle, A seemingly mundane act of excavation immediately shifts the focus from abstract speculation to concrete, tangible evidence. This isn't just about finding a car, it's about unearthing a time capsule, a snapshot of their final hours preserved by the very geological forces that may have contributed to their disappearance. The sheer depth at which the vehicle was discovered, buried beneath decades of accumulated sediment and rockfall, speaks volumes about the power of natural processes within the Grand Canyon. This isn't a simple case of a car rolling off a scenic overlook. It suggests a far more dynamic and potentially violent event, perhaps a significant landslide or flash flood that entombed their vehicle with astonishing speed and force. Investigators are now faced with the monumental task of meticulously excavating and analyzing every inch of the car, treating it not merely as a piece of evidence, but as a fragile historical document. The interior, if preserved, could hold intimate clues, the contents of their pockets, personal effects, perhaps even a hastily scrawled note or the last entries in a journal. Each item, no matter how insignificant it might seem, will be scrutinized for its potential to illuminate their state of mind, their plans, and the sequence of events leading up to their vanishing. Furthermore, the condition of the car itself, the extent of damage, signs of struggle, or any modifications made will provide critical insights into the circumstances of its burial. Moreover, the geological context of the discovery is paramount. Understanding the specific stratigraphy, the layers of soil, sand, and rock surrounding the vehicle allows geologists and forensic investigators to reconstruct the environmental conditions at the time of their disappearance. Was the area prone to flash floods? Were there known unstable slopes in that particular region of the canyon? The presence of specific minerals or sediment types might indicate the type of event that occurred, whether it was a sudden inundation of water, a slow engulfment by shifting earth, or a catastrophic debris flow. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting such findings. It requires a multidisciplinary approach, blending the meticulousness of forensic science with the deep understanding of earth sciences. The soil composition, the presence of specific plant or animal, remains within the sediment layers. Even the microscopic traces of pollen can help to pinpoint the season and perhaps even the specific weather conditions that prevailed during their final hours. This scientific archaeology, digging through layers of time, transforms the very landscape into a witness, offering silent testimony if only we can learn to read its story. Building on this, the recovery of the vehicle necessitates a re-evaluation of the initial search parameters and strategies employed 32 years ago. The fact that their car remained undiscovered for so long, despite extensive searches, highlights the immense scale and deceptive nature of the Grand Canyon. It underscores the limitations of search and rescue operations in such a vast and rugged environment, especially when the terrain itself actively conceals evidence. The initial searches, likely focused on more conventional scenarios like accidental falls or getting lost on established trails, may have overlooked areas that were not considered probable sites for a vehicle to be located, particularly if they were not on any marked road or designated parking area. The discovery now forces investigators to question assumptions made during the original investigation and to consider less obvious possibilities. Consequently, the entire operational history of the park during that period, including any reported geological events or unusual weather patterns that might have altered the landscape, will be re-examined. The challenge lies in sifting through old records, correlating them with the new findings, and identifying any overlooked anomalies that might have been dismissed as insignificant at the time. Another crucial layer is the psychological impact of this discovery on the park community and, more importantly, on the surviving family members of Mark and Sarah. For 32 years, they have lived with the agonizing uncertainty, a perpetual state of not knowing. The unearthing of the car, while offering the potential for answers, also brings the raw pain and grief of their loss flooding back into the present. It's a profound reminder that behind every cold case, every historical mystery, there are real people whose lives were irrevocably altered. The investigators now carry not only the burden of solving a complex puzzle, but also the responsibility of handling this deeply personal and sensitive situation with the utmost care and compassion. They must navigate the delicate balance between the pursuit of truth and the profound emotional implications for those who have waited so long for any sign, any shred of information. This human element, often overshadowed by the scientific and investigative aspects, is critical to understanding the full scope of what this rediscovery represents. It is a moment of profound reckoning, where the geological past meets the enduring human need for closure, forcing a confrontation with a tragedy that has been suspended in time. The careful excavation of the vehicle, a meticulous process akin to delicate surgery on history, yields its first tangible insights. Beyond the obvious forensic evidence like fingerprints or DNA, the internal state of the car offers a window into the moments before its entombment. Consider the position of the gear shift. Was it in park, neutral, or perhaps even in drive, suggesting an abrupt halt? The state of the dashboard instruments, if preserved, could reveal whether the engine was running, if the headlights were on, or if any warning lights were illuminated, painting a picture of the car's operational status at the time of the incident. Furthermore, the personal belongings found within the passenger compartment are crucial. Were their hiking boots neatly stored, suggesting an intention for a planned excursion, or were they hastily thrown in, indicating a more spontaneous or perhaps panicked departure from the vehicle? The presence of maps, guidebooks, or even a GPS device and their condition could reveal if they were actively using them, potentially indicating disorientation or a deviation from their intended route. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting such findings. The distribution of objects within the car can also be telling. Were items scattered as if in a struggle, or were they neatly organized, suggesting the occupants had time to prepare or were in a state of calm before disaster struck? The very act of preservation by the sediment can also offer clues. For instance, if certain items are remarkably well preserved while others are degraded, it might hint at the specific environmental conditions that affected different parts of the vehicle. Moreover, the external condition of the car provides vital clues about the forces that acted upon it. Investigators will meticulously examine the body for signs of impact, abrasion, or deformation. Were there deep gouges suggesting contact with sharp rocks during a slide, or crushing damage indicative of a significant rockfall? The presence and nature of sediment adhering to the vehicle's exterior are equally significant. Different geological layers have distinct compositions, and the types of soil, sand, or rock fragments embedded in the car's chassis can help geologists correlate the vehicle's location with specific geological formations or past events like landslides or flash floods. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of understanding the sequence of events. If the car is significantly tilted or buried at an angle, it might suggest it was caught in a flow of water or debris that deposited it in its final resting place. Conversely, if it appears to have settled more passively, it might point to a slower engulfment by shifting earth. The tires, if still intact, could reveal whether they were inflated or deflated, offering further clues about the timeline of events and the degree of pressure exerted upon the vehicle. The analysis extends to the immediate vicinity surrounding the recovered vehicle. Geologists and search teams will conduct detailed surveys of the surrounding terrain, looking for any anomalies that might corroborate the story told by the car. Were there signs of a recent or ancient landslide in the area that could have swept the vehicle downslope? Is the location consistent with a known flash flood path, even if the flood occurred many years ago? The presence of displaced rocks, altered vegetation patterns, or unusual sediment deposits can all serve as silent witnesses to the events that transpired. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of piecing together the environmental narrative. The discovery of any other debris, even organic material like branches or leaves trapped alongside the car, can provide further clues about the nature of the event. For example, the type of wood or plant matter might indicate the origin of a debris flow, or the presence of specific aquatic organisms within the sediment could confirm inundation by water. Furthermore, the precise location of the discovery, when mapped against existing geological surveys and historical records of park access, becomes critical. Was this area accessible by any known roads or trails, even unmaintained ones, 32 years ago? If not, it raises questions about how Mark and Sarah reached this remote spot. Did they venture off-road, perhaps seeking a more secluded experience? Or was there a forgotten access route that has since been reclaimed by nature? Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of reconstructing their movements. Correlating the car's location with their last known whereabouts and their intended itinerary, if available, will be essential in building a plausible timeline. The very fact that the car remained undiscovered for so long, buried so deeply, suggests that the event that occurred there was significant enough to dramatically alter the landscape, effectively burying the evidence of their fate for decades. This deep burial is not an incidental detail, it's a fundamental piece of the puzzle, indicating that whatever happened was a potent geological force, not merely a simple mishap. The profound implications of this discovery ripple outward, touching upon the very nature of evidence preservation and the challenges of modern forensic science when confronted with deep geological time. The sediment that encased Mark and Sarah's car is not merely inert dirt. It's a complex medium that has interacted with the vehicle over 3 decades. Forensic geologists are now meticulously examining the mineral composition, grain size distribution, and organic content of these layers. This microscopic analysis can reveal crucial environmental signatures. For instance, the presence of specific clay minerals might indicate periods of prolonged saturation and drying, characteristic of a flash flood event, while a high proportion of angular rock fragments could point to a rapid debris flow involving significant rockfall. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of reconstructing the sequence of events. The way these sediments are layered or stratified creates a chronological record. By analyzing these strata from bottom to top, investigators can attempt to reconstruct the order in which different materials were deposited, potentially revealing whether the car was first inundated by water and then buried by subsequent landslides, or vice versa. Furthermore, the vehicle's internal environment, sealed by the surrounding sediment, may have preserved subtle clues that would have long since degraded in open air. Trace volatile organic compounds, VOCs, released from materials within the car. Plastics, upholstery, even lingering personal care products could still be present. Advanced analytical techniques, such as gas chromatography mass spectrometry, GCMS, can identify and quantify these VOCs. The specific combination and concentration of these compounds might offer indirect evidence about the car's condition at the time of its burial, for example, indicating whether the engine had been running recently, generating exhaust fumes, or if materials had begun to degrade due to prolonged exposure to moisture. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these chemical signatures. These VOC profiles can act like a unique fingerprint for the car's interior environment, helping to differentiate between natural degradation and potential indicators of the occupant's activities or even distress. The scientific challenge extends to the potential for biological evidence. While intact DNA from the occupants might be degraded, microbial communities within the car's interior and the surrounding sediment could provide valuable information. Analyzing the DNA of these microorganisms can help establish the timeline of burial and the environmental conditions that prevailed. Certain bacteria thrive in anaerobic, waterlogged conditions, while others prefer drier environments. The presence and abundance of specific microbial species can therefore act as biosignatures, corroborating or challenging the hypotheses derived from geological and chemical analyses. Now, consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these biological indicators. Understanding the microbiome of the buried car can offer an independent line of evidence, helping to refine the narrative of how and when the vehicle met its end. Moreover, the very act of excavating the vehicle has the potential to disturb or even destroy delicate evidence. This necessitates the use of highly specialized techniques, such as controlled atmospheric enclosures during excavation or the use of inert gases to preserve fragile materials. The recovery process itself becomes a critical phase where scientific protocol must be paramount. Imagine a scenario where a crucial fiber, a fragment of clothing or a sliver of paper is inadvertently lost during excavation due to improper handling. The entire investigative trajectory could be irrevocably altered. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of balancing preservation with recovery. Investigators must employ a strategy that maximizes the retrieval of information while minimizing the risk of contamination or destruction. A tightrope walk between scientific rigor and the practicalities of fieldwork in a challenging environment. The depth of burial also means that the vehicle has been subjected to significant lithostatic pressure over the years, potentially distorting its form and making precise measurements more difficult. Understanding the geological pressures and stresses that acted upon the car is crucial for accurately interpreting its structural integrity and any deformation it has undergone. The very nature of evidence preservation in such an extreme environment presents a unique set of challenges that transcend typical forensic investigations. The deep burial means the vehicle has been subjected to immense geological pressures over 32 years, potentially distorting its original form and making precise measurements more difficult. Understanding the lithostatic pressures and stresses that acted upon the car is crucial for accurately interpreting its structural integrity and any deformation it has undergone. Geologists must account for how the weight of the overlying rock and soil could have altered the car's dimensions, perhaps compressing certain sections or causing previously intact components to fracture. This requires sophisticated modeling and careful comparison with the known properties of automotive materials under such sustained stress. Furthermore, the long-term effects of subterranean moisture and chemical interactions within the soil can significantly degrade materials. Plastics can become brittle, metal components can corrode extensively, and even glass can undergo a process called weathering at a microscopic level, becoming etched or clouded. Forensic conservators must employ specialized techniques to stabilize these fragile materials before they can be further analyzed. Imagine trying to preserve a delicate ancient manuscript that has been submerged in water for decades. The approach requires immense patience and a deep understanding of material science to prevent further disintegration. Consequently, the examination of any remaining paint or coating on the car's exterior is a delicate operation, as these layers are likely compromised and prone to flaking off upon contact. The environmental conditions that led to the car's burial also dictate the preservation state of any organic materials within or around it. If the burial was rapid and involved fine-grained sediment, it might have created an anaerobic, oxygen-poor environment, which can significantly slow down decomposition. Conversely, If there were periods of water saturation followed by drying, it could have accelerated degradation through freeze-thaw cycles or chemical oxidation. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these varied conditions. The presence of specific mineral deposits, such as iron oxides or calcium carbonates, within the surrounding soil can indicate past hydrological regimes and the potential for chemical reactions that might have altered or preserved evidence. The precise location of the vehicle's discovery, when cross-referenced with historical park records and geological surveys, adds another critical layer to the puzzle. Was this area known for seismic activity or significant past erosion events that could have dramatically reshaped the landscape? The absence of any recorded road or trail leading to this specific point 32 years ago necessitates a re-evaluation of how Mark and Sarah might have reached this remote location. It raises the possibility of them venturing off established paths, perhaps seeking a more secluded camping spot or an undocumented viewpoint, a decision that, in retrospect, proved tragically consequential. Moreover, the very act of excavating the vehicle has the potential to disturb or even destroy delicate evidence. This necessitates the use of highly specialized techniques, such as controlled atmospheric enclosures during excavation or the use of inert gases to preserve fragile materials. Forensic conservators must employ specialized techniques to stabilize these fragile materials before they can be further analyzed. Imagine trying to preserve a delicate ancient manuscript that has been submerged in water for decades. The approach requires immense patience and a deep understanding of material science to prevent further disintegration. Consequently, the examination of any remaining paint or coating on the car's exterior is a delicate operation, as these layers are likely compromised and prone to flaking off upon contact. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of balancing preservation with recovery. Investigators must employ a strategy that maximizes the retrieval of information while minimizing the risk of contamination or destruction, a tightrope walk between scientific rigor and the practicalities of fieldwork in a challenging environment. The depth of burial also means that the vehicle has been subjected to significant lithostatic pressure over the years, potentially distorting its form and making precise measurements more difficult. Understanding the geological pressures and stresses that acted upon the car is crucial for accurately interpreting its structural integrity and any deformation it has undergone. The very essence of this rediscovery lies in its potential to challenge long-held assumptions about the Grand Canyon's accessibility and the perceived safety of its designated routes. For decades, the official narrative surrounding disappearances like Mark and Sarah's often defaulted to scenarios involving hikers straying from marked trails, succumbing to heat exhaustion, or experiencing misjudgments on precipitous ledges. However, the remote location of their buried vehicle, far from any known established roads or even primitive tracks from that era, forces a re-examination of how they might have navigated the terrain. It suggests a level of off-road travel, perhaps utilizing an obscure or forgotten service road, or even a deliberate expedition into areas not intended for public vehicle access. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of reconstructing their journey. Investigators will need to delve into old Park Service maps, records of land management practices from the late 1980s, and even interview former rangers or long-time residents who might recall less documented access points or historical land use patterns that have since been obscured by natural reclamation. Furthermore, the type of vehicle itself, presumed to be a standard American sedan or SUV of the era, plays a significant role in this revised understanding. Such vehicles, while capable on unpaved roads, are not designed for extreme off-road conditions, particularly those encountered in rugged canyon environments. The fact that it was found so deeply buried implies it was not merely driven into a soft patch of sand and abandoned. Rather, it suggests it was caught in a significant geological event. This event could have been a substantial flash flood, a landslide, or even a debris flow, capable of mobilizing and entombing a vehicle of that size. Consequently, the geological analysis of the surrounding strata becomes paramount. Identifying the specific sediment types, whether it's coarse gravel, indicative of a high-energy flood, or fine silts and clays mixed with rock fragments suggesting a mudslide, will be crucial in determining the forces at play. The implication here is that Mark and Sarah may have been attempting a more adventurous or exploratory journey than initially assumed, perhaps seeking a unique, secluded viewpoint or a less trafficked area for a picnic or overnight stay. This would necessitate a more thorough understanding of their motivations and their familiarity with the canyon's less predictable aspects. Did they possess detailed topographical maps? Were they equipped with communication devices that, while primitive by today's standards, might have offered a lifeline? Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of deciphering their intent. The contents of the vehicle, if preserved, will offer vital clues. A well-worn guidebook with highlighted sections, or maps with meticulous annotations, would suggest a planned and informed excursion into less conventional territory. Conversely, a pristine map or a lack of navigational aids might indicate a degree of impulsiveness or perhaps overconfidence in their ability to navigate the park's extensive backcountry. The very condition of the tires, for instance, whether they show signs of significant wear from rough terrain or appear relatively new, could shed light on their preparedness for venturing off established routes. Moreover, the discovery recontextualizes the concept of lost within the Grand Canyon. It's not simply about individuals becoming disoriented on a trail, it's about the possibility of entire vehicles being swallowed by the landscape, rendering them invisible for decades. This highlights the dynamic nature of the canyon, where geological processes are constantly at work, reshaping the terrain and obscuring the traces of human passage. The fact that their car remained hidden for so long despite initial searches underscores the sheer scale of the canyon and its capacity to conceal evidence. It's a stark reminder that even with diligent efforts, the wilderness can hold its secrets with an almost impenetrable grip. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of understanding the scope of past searches. Investigators must meticulously review the original search grids and methodologies to determine if the area where the car was found was adequately covered, or if it was deemed too improbable a location for a vehicle to be situated, thus falling outside the scope of conventional search parameters. The narrative of their disappearance, therefore, is not just about their final moments, but also about the limitations of human capacity to foresee and account for the overwhelming power of natural forces when confronting such an immense and active geological environment. The unearthed vehicle doesn't just represent a static artifact. Its very state of preservation, or lack thereof, offers a dynamic narrative of chemical reactions and physical weathering that occurred over 3 decades beneath the Earth's crust. Imagine the metals within the car: steel chassis components, aluminum engine parts, copper wiring, acting as electrodes in a vast subterranean battery. The varying moisture levels, dissolved minerals in groundwater, and the differing electrochemical potentials between these metals would have driven galvanic corrosion, a process that actively degrades and transforms the vehicle's structure. Forensic metallurgists will meticulously analyze the corrosion products, the rusts, the oxides, the carbonates, to infer the specific environmental conditions and the duration of exposure. For instance, the presence of certain iron sulfide minerals might indicate anaerobic conditions where sulfate-reducing bacteria played a role, a process often associated with prolonged submersion in waterlogged sediment. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these findings. The precise pattern of corrosion on different metal components can map the flow of water and the distribution of corrosive agents within the surrounding soil, providing a three-dimensional understanding of the car's burial environment. Building on this, the interaction between the car's various materials and the surrounding soil creates a complex matrix of chemical signatures. Plastics, for example, are not inert. They can leach plasticizers or undergo photodegradation even in low-light conditions, releasing volatile compounds that might be detectable. The fabrics and upholstery could have absorbed moisture and organic matter from the soil, promoting the growth of specific fungi or bacteria whose metabolic byproducts leave distinct chemical traces. Forensic chemists will employ techniques like pyrolysis, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, PIGCMS, to analyze these complex mixtures, essentially heating small samples of material to break them down into their constituent molecules and then identifying them. This can reveal the presence of specific dyes from upholstery, residues from cleaning products, or even trace amounts of biological material that have been preserved within the polymer matrix. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of isolating these signals. The sheer volume of potential chemical signals requires advanced analytical methods and sophisticated data interpretation to distinguish between evidence directly related to the car and its occupants and background chemical noise from the natural environment. Furthermore, the concept of paleo-environmental reconstruction takes on a new dimension when applied to the immediate vicinity of the buried vehicle. Geologists will examine the sediment layers not just for their mineral content, but also for preserved organic remains, seeds, pollen grains, insect exoskeletons, or even fragments of plant tissue. The types of pollen present, for instance, can indicate the dominant flora in the area at the time of burial, offering clues about the season and the general climate. The presence of specific types of seeds or leaf litter might suggest whether the car was engulfed by a slow-moving debris flow carrying vegetation from higher elevations, or if it was submerged in a more static body of water that supported aquatic plant life. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these biological fossils. The preservation state of these organic materials is highly dependent on the specific conditions of burial, pH of the soil, oxygen availability, and moisture content. Understanding these factors is key to accurately dating the event and reconstructing the ecological context in which Mark and Sarah met their fate. The very texture and structure of the sediment, whether it's finely laminated, cross-bedded, or massive, tells a story about the energy and dynamics of the depositional process, providing visual cues to the forces that acted upon the car. The very fibers of the car's interior, from the synthetic weaves of the upholstery to the natural cellulose of paper documents, have undergone a slow, silent transformation over 32 years of subterranean existence. Forensic textile analysts and paper conservators face the daunting task of identifying these materials, not just by their original composition, but by their altered state. Polymers, for instance, can undergo hydrolysis, breaking down into smaller, more mobile molecules that may leach into the surrounding sediment, or conversely, cross-linking to form a more rigid, degraded structure. The specific types of degradation can offer clues about the pH and moisture content of the soil, acting as a chemical barometer of the burial environment. Now, consider how this applies when you face the challenge of extracting information from these altered materials. A faded photograph, once a vibrant depiction of Mark and Sarah's lives, might now be a fragile, discolored membrane, its image barely discernible. Yet advanced imaging techniques, such as infrared or ultraviolet reflectance spectroscopy, can sometimes reveal latent details invisible to the naked eye, coaxing spectral echoes from the degraded emulsion. Furthermore, the car's metal components, subjected to prolonged contact with soil and groundwater, have become hosts to a unique microbial ecosystem. Specialized microbiologists can analyze the DNA of these extremophiles, organisms that thrive in challenging subterranean conditions. The genetic fingerprint of these microbial communities can provide independent dating estimates for the burial event, as different species colonize and dominate environments at varying rates. Certain anaerobic bacteria, for example, are known to flourish in environments devoid of oxygen, often found in deep, waterlogged sediments. Identifying their presence and abundance can corroborate hypotheses about the hydrological regime that engulf the vehicle. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these microbial signatures. The distribution of these microbial communities within the sediment layers surrounding the car can even indicate the direction and speed of water flow during the deposition event, painting a picture of the dynamic forces that acted upon the vehicle. Beyond the primary materials of the car, investigators must also consider any ancillary items that might have been present. A forgotten backpack, a discarded water bottle, or even the remnants of a picnic lunch, if preserved, could offer invaluable insights. The plastic of a water bottle, for example, might exhibit specific patterns of crazing or chalking depending on the soil's chemical composition and the duration of exposure. The analysis of any remaining food particles, however degraded, could potentially reveal dietary habits or the specific types of provisions Mark and Sarah carried, adding another layer to their personal narrative. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of sifting through such minute details. Even a seemingly insignificant item like a leather wallet or a rubber tire can contain unique chemical markers, such as specific tanning agents used in leather processing or vulcanization accelerators in rubber compounds, that can help to identify the manufacturer and potentially even the production period of these components. The very act of excavation, while necessary for retrieval, carries inherent risks to the fragile evidence it uncovers. Specialized techniques, such as the use of controlled atmospheric enclosures or the application of stabilizing consolidants, must be employed to prevent further deterioration of materials once exposed to ambient air. Imagine trying to preserve an ancient fresco that has been protected for centuries by a cave's stable environment, only to see it crumble when exposed to the fluctuating conditions of the outside world. A similar fragility applies here. The temperature, humidity, and even the airflow can accelerate degradation processes. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of managing these environmental variables. Forensic conservators must work in tandem with the excavation team, often preparing and applying stabilizing treatments in situ before the delicate artifacts are even removed from their protective sediment matrix. This meticulous approach ensures that the maximum amount of information can be gleaned from the recovered remains, respecting the 32-year-long process of preservation that nature has undertaken. The notion of forensic palynology, the study of pollen and spores in a forensic context, offers a potentially groundbreaking avenue for understanding Mark and Sarah's final movements. Pollen grains are incredibly resilient, microscopic structures produced by flowering plants and trees, and their dispersal patterns are highly specific to particular species, geographic locations, and even seasons. By meticulously collecting sediment samples from various locations within and around the buried vehicle, and then analyzing these samples under high-powered microscopes, investigators can potentially identify the unique pollen profiles of the flora that surrounded the car at the time of its entombment. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these microscopic clues. If the pollen assemblage found within the car's interior differs significantly from that found in the surrounding sediment layers, it could suggest that the car was originally located in a different microenvironment before being moved by a geological event. For instance, A pollen signature dominated by desert scrub might be found in the car's upholstery, while the deeper surrounding sediment might contain pollen from riparian species, indicating a flash flood that carried the vehicle into a wetter area. Furthermore, the presence of certain types of fungal spores, which are also remarkably durable, can provide additional environmental context. Some fungi are highly specific to decaying organic matter, while others thrive in particular soil conditions or atmospheric moisture levels. Identifying these fungal spores can help to refine the timeline of burial and the specific microclimatic conditions that prevailed. Imagine a detective using distinct soil types clinging to a suspect's shoes to pinpoint their recent locations. Palynology operates on a similar principle, but at a microscopic level, using botanical fingerprints to reconstruct a narrative of movement and environmental exposure. This scientific discipline can also help to establish the season of the disappearance. Different plant species flower and release pollen at distinct times of the year, creating unique seasonal pollen fingerprints. If the sediment samples consistently show pollen from plants that only bloom in late spring, for example, it would strongly suggest that Mark and Sarah vanished during that particular season. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of isolating these botanical signals. The sheer abundance of pollen grains in any given sample necessitates the use of statistical analysis to identify significant patterns and outliers, distinguishing between background pollen that may have been transported by wind over long distances and pollen that is directly representative of the immediate burial environment. Another critical layer involves the potential for identifying transported pollen or spores from distant locations. Wind currents, particularly in a vast open environment like the Grand Canyon, can carry pollen for hundreds of miles. However, the relative abundance of different pollen types can still provide valuable information. If a pollen type that is characteristic of a specific higher altitude forest is found in significant quantities within the car, it might indicate that Mark and Sarah had recently traveled through or camped in such an area before their final moments. Conversely, if the dominant pollen is from low-lying desert shrubs, it points towards an environment consistent with the canyon floor. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of differentiating between local and transported pollen. Palynologists employ a process of comparative analysis, cross-referencing the identified pollen types with detailed regional botanical surveys and meteorological data to understand typical dispersal patterns. This meticulous process allows them to build a more accurate picture of the car's most recent environmental exposures, effectively piecing together a botanical itinerary of their final journey. The integration of this microscopic botanical evidence with the macroscopic geological data, the sediment layers, the rock types, the evidence of water flow, creates a more robust and multifaceted understanding of the events that transpired. The investigation now turns to the subtle yet significant clues embedded within the vehicle's very construction and any personal effects that might have survived the decades-long ordeal. Modern forensic engineering can analyze micro-wear patterns on components like the brake pads or the accelerator pedal, potentially revealing the driving style or the sequence of braking and acceleration in the moments leading up to the incident. For instance, if the brake pads show significant uniform wear, it might suggest prolonged application, perhaps during a controlled descent or an attempt to slow down on a steep, unstable incline. Conversely, a sudden, sharp wear pattern could indicate an emergency braking maneuver. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting these mechanical signatures. Analyzing the wear on the tires beyond simple tread depth can reveal information about the vehicle's alignment and suspension. Uneven wear on one side, for example, might point to a sideways impact or prolonged stress on one axle, perhaps from being lodged against an obstacle. Furthermore, the meticulous examination of any paper-based items, maps, receipts, or personal documents, can be equally revealing. While significant degradation is expected, advanced imaging techniques, such as multispectral imaging, can often reveal latent text or indentations left by writing on subsequent pages. Archivists and forensic document examiners can then work to decipher these faint traces, potentially uncovering details about their planned route, intended destinations, or even personal reflections. Imagine a historian carefully deciphering ancient brittle parchment. A similar delicate touch is required here, but with the goal of reconstructing recent history. The type of paper, the ink composition, and even the watermark, if present, can help date documents and potentially link them to specific sources or locations. Now, consider how this applies when you face the challenge of preserving these fragile artifacts. Treatments might involve carefully controlled humidity and specialized adhesives to stabilize the paper before any attempt is made to unfold or scan it, ensuring that the act of examination does not inadvertently destroy the evidence. The discovery of personal electronic devices, however unlikely given the era and the conditions, would represent a significant breakthrough. Even if the devices themselves are beyond repair, the memory chips or storage media might retain recoverable data. Forensic data recovery specialists can employ highly specialized techniques to extract information from damaged or corroded solid-state drives or flash memory. This could include GPS logs detailing their movements, communication records, or even photographic or video evidence from their trip. Now, consider how this applies when you face the challenge of retrieving data from damaged media. The process is akin to excavating delicate archaeological artifacts, where each step must be carefully planned to avoid further corruption of the stored information. The sheer improbability of such recovery underscores the technological advancements in data forensics that have occurred since their disappearance. Finally, the investigation must also consider the possibility of less conventional evidence. For example, if there were any personal firearms or camping equipment found, their condition and placement within or around the vehicle could offer critical context. A firearm, if present, would be examined for signs of discharge, maintenance, or any modifications that might suggest its intended use. Similarly, camping gear, such as tents or sleeping bags, if miraculously preserved, could provide clues about their preparedness for overnight stays and the conditions they expected to encounter. Now consider how this applies when you face the challenge of interpreting the condition of such items. The presence of specific types of ammunition, for instance, might indicate their intended purpose for protection against wildlife or for recreational shooting, further informing the understanding of their activities within the canyon. Reflecting on this journey through the layers of a decades-old mystery, we've seen how the very Earth, through its geological memory, has begun to yield secrets long held captive. The unearthed vehicle, once a symbol of youthful adventure, has transformed into a multifaceted artifact, each fragment speaking a silent language of scientific inquiry and human endeavor. The intricate dance between natural forces and human presence, so vividly illustrated by the car's deep burial, underscores the profound interplay between our lives and the enduring power of the natural world. As we've navigated the scientific disciplines that converge on this discovery, from the microscopic analysis of sediment to the chemical signatures preserved within degraded materials, a more complete, albeit still unfolding picture has begun to emerge. The convergence of these diverse threads, each meticulously examined, paints a compelling portrait of a story that transcends a simple account of disappearance. In light of these insights, the path forward towards understanding and perhaps closure becomes illuminated by the persistent illumination of evidence. We've witnessed how seemingly disparate fields of study, when brought to bear on a singular enigma, begin to weave a cohesive narrative, much like individual threads contributing to a complex tapestry. The initial assumptions that once framed this cold case are now being re-examined through the lens of tangible findings, each piece of evidence adding a crucial dimension to our comprehension. The canyon itself, once a silent witness, is now actively participating in the revelation, its geological strata acting as an archive, its elemental composition a Rosetta Stone for deciphering the past. As we pivot towards the final reflection, consider the cumulative effect of these explorations. It's as if we've been piecing together a vast three-dimensional puzzle where each discovered clue, be it a chemical trace, a geological layer, or a microscopic botanical remnant, fits into a larger, emergent design. The challenge has been to see the forest for the trees, to understand how the minute details contribute to the grander narrative. This process has underscored the enduring human drive to seek truth, to connect with the past, and to bring resolution to the narratives that time and nature might otherwise render irretrievable. The journey so far has been one of careful excavation, not just of the physical remains, but of the layers of understanding that surround such a profound event, leading us toward a more comprehensive appreciation of the story that still seeks its final telling. The echoes of Mark and Sarah's story, once lost to the vast silence of the Grand Canyon, now resonate with a newfound clarity, not as a tale of simple tragedy, but as a profound testament to the Earth's enduring memory and the relentless pursuit of understanding. The recovery of their vehicle, a spectral artifact unearthed from the depths of time, has served as a powerful catalyst, transforming decades of unanswered questions into a tangible investigation. This journey through geological strata, chemical signatures and botanical fingerprints has revealed that the canyon itself is not merely a backdrop to human events, but an active participant, its very substance preserving and revealing the narrative of what transpired. The meticulous scientific endeavor, piecing together fragments of evidence from a landscape that has continuously reshaped itself, underscores a fundamental truth: that even in the face of nature's immense power and the relentless march of time, the pursuit of knowledge can illuminate the darkest corners of our past. What emerges from this intricate reconstruction is not just the resolution of a cold case, but a deeper appreciation for the delicate balance between human presence and the raw, untamed forces of the natural world. The story of Mark and Sarah, once suspended in an agonizing void, now serves as a poignant reminder of our own vulnerability and the respect that such formidable landscapes demand. It highlights how the Earth, in its silent geological processes, holds within it the echoes of countless moments, waiting for the right confluence of discovery and scientific rigor to bring them back into the light. The canyon, in its grandeur, teaches us that while we may seek adventure and connection within its embrace, we do so on terms dictated by forces far older and more powerful than ourselves. This rediscovery is more than just the closure of a file. It is an invitation to a broader contemplation of how we engage with the wild, how we interpret the traces we leave behind, and how the Earth, in turn, remembers us. It's a powerful illustration that the pursuit of truth is often a slow, painstaking process, requiring patience, interdisciplinary collaboration, and an unwavering commitment to uncovering the facts, no matter how deeply buried. The true practice of understanding, therefore, begins now, not just in deciphering the specifics of this particular case, but in carrying forward the lessons learned, a respect for the land, a dedication to meticulous investigation, and an enduring faith in the power of knowledge to bring peace to lingering mysteries. The story of Mark and Sarah, finally given voice by the Earth itself, serves as a lasting monument to both human resilience and the profound, often humbling, wisdom held within the heart of the wild.